Remarkable, isn't it? How effortlessly we divide ourselves into them and us. Yes, today, I'd like to talk about something deeply ingrained in the human psyche, something subtle yet powerful, a curious cognitive bias that we all indulge in, often without realizing it. The group attribution error. It's a deceptively simple term, yet it reveals something extraordinary about how we think, how we categorize, how we judge. You see, it's the habit we have of assuming that the characteristics or behaviors of a few members of a group are representative of the entire group. A single spark of behavior becomes, in our minds, a wildfire of generalization. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine for a moment you meet a rather rude tourist. Let's say they're French, just for argument's sake. This one particular person pushes past you in a line, maybe throws a few words your way in a language you don't understand. Now, what happens in your mind? You might feel that this one individual, in their impatience, represents all French people, that somehow this entire nation, this culture, is rude. Ah, but there's the rub. You've taken one person's behavior and, like some mental alchemist, turned it into a sweeping judgment about millions of people. One rude Frenchman becomes France itself. It's absurd, isn't it? But it's also profoundly human. You see, this group attribution error, it's not just a fleeting mistake we make. It's a shortcut, a cognitive efficiency that our brains love. The world is vast, full of individuals with all their complexities and contradictions, and that, my friends, is simply too much for the mind to manage. So instead, we lump people together. We file them neatly into little mental folders labeled good, bad, trustworthy, or perhaps dangerous. It's an ancient instinct, tribal, primal, meant to help us survive by simplifying a chaotic world. But as with most instincts, it's riddled with error. Now consider how this bias functions on a larger scale. Think of nations at war. We see headlines, snippets of violence, or acts of aggression by individuals in a foreign army, and suddenly we've condemned an entire country. They're all like that, we think, every one of them. It's the same trick our minds play when we hear of crimes committed by a few members of a particular community or religion. Suddenly, in our minds, they are all criminals, all guilty. Isn't that terrifying? How easily we can let a sliver of truth, or perhaps even a complete falsehood, define the whole. It's a distortion of reality that has fueled conflict for centuries, from the Crusades to the Cold War and beyond. But it's not always about conflict, is it? Sometimes it's more subtle. You meet a brilliant scientist from Japan, and in your mind you conclude that all Japanese people must be exceptionally intelligent. Or perhaps you see a joyful, spirited Irishman at a bar and assume, ah, the Irish. They must all be so fun-loving and charming. And there we are again, caught in the web of our own assumptions. Positive or negative, the group attribution error blinds us to the individual. It leads us to believe that groups are monolithic, predictable, when in truth, groups are just clusters of individuals, each one complex, contradictory, and unique. Isn't that the beauty of humanity? That no one fits neatly into a box, no matter how much our minds want them to. But let's dig deeper still. Why do we do this? Why is our mind so quick to generalize? Well, you see, it's much easier to deal with groups than with individuals. When you think of someone as part of a group, you don't have to bother with the messy business of understanding their story, their background, their humanity. You just slap a label on them. Oh, they're one of them, and move on. It saves time. But in saving time, we lose something infinitely more valuable. We lose connection, understanding, compassion. We lose our ability to see people as they truly are. Ah, but we're all guilty of it, aren't we? Even the most enlightened among us have fallen into this trap. You might think of yourself as open-minded, as someone who sees everyone as an individual. But I'd wager In the dark corners of your mind, there's a group or two you've unfairly categorized. Maybe it's people from a political party you don't like, or a generation you don't understand. Millennials are lazy, or boomers are out of touch. You see how it creeps in? It's so subtle, so ingrained in our thinking that we don't even notice it. So the next time you find yourself making a sweeping judgment about a group of people based on the actions of a few, catch yourself. Pause. Ask yourself, am I seeing individuals? Or am I seeing shadows of my own prejudice, my own convenience? Because, my dear friends, the truth is, people are far too varied, far too rich in their experiences and inner lives to be summed up by one label, one moment, or one assumption. Every person you meet has a story, a unique story that doesn't fit neatly into the boxes we like to create. And it's in those stories, in those messy, beautiful contradictions, that we find our shared humanity. We realize that we are not so different after all. We are individuals within groups, yes, but we are always, first and foremost, ourselves. So let's be kinder to one another, shall we? Let's resist the temptation to judge whole groups based on the actions of a few. Let's remember that, at the end of the day, the group attribution error is just that, an error, a misstep in our thinking. And we, being clever creatures, can choose to rise above it. We can choose to see people as they truly are, complex, unpredictable, and wonderfully unique. After all, isn't that what makes life so fascinating? The knowledge that we are all more than the sum of our parts, more than the groups we belong to. We are gloriously human. Ah, the remarkable complexity of the human mind.